February 26, 1935, a misty field near Devonshire, England. The air is crisp and biting, carrying the faint hum of distant engines as you stand among a cluster of wooden huts and makeshift antennas, the ground slick with morning dew under your boots. Robert Watson-Watt, a lanky Scottish physicist with wire-rimmed glasses and a determined glint in his eye, paces nervously beside a battered oscilloscope screen, his breath fogging in the chill. Around him, a small team from the Air Ministry huddles in overcoats, skeptical whispers cutting through the wind. Could this really work? In the distance, a Hayford bomber from the Royal Air Force roars to life, its twin Kestrel engines throttling up as it lifts off from a nearby airstrip, climbing into the grey sky on a predetermined path. Watson-Watt adjusts a dial on his receiver, the device crackling with static, and suddenly, the screen flickers. A blip appears, pulsing in rhythm with the aircraft's position miles away. The team's eyes widen. This isn't just radio waves bouncing off clouds, it's detection, invisible and instantaneous, piercing the veil of the unknown. In those tense moments, Watson-Watt isn't just tinkering with electronics, he's forging a weapon against the gathering shadows of war. As the Hayford circles back, its silhouette barely visible through the haze, the signal strengthens and fades predictably, proving his theory. High-frequency radio pulses could reflect off metal aircraft, revealing their approach long before eyes or ears could. You can almost feel the shift in the air, the quiet realization among the observers that Britain, an island nation vulnerable to aerial assault, might have found its shield. Watson-Watt, then superintendent at the Radio Research Station in Slapo, had been tasked by the Committee for the Scientific Survey of Air Defense, a mouthful of a name for a desperate effort to counter the rising threat from Nazi Germany. Hitler had just reintroduced conscription, defying the Treaty of Versailles, and Luftwaffe bombers, like the Heinkel He-111, were rolling off assembly lines, their wings casting long shadows over Europe. The British knew invasion could come from the skies, but spotting enemy planes in time. Flash forward a few months, and Watson-Watt is deep in the bowels of Bawdsey Manor, a sprawling Victorian estate on the Suffolk coast, repurposed as a secret research hub. The salty sea breeze whips through cracked windows as engineers hunch over blueprints, soldering irons hissing against circuit boards. Watson-Watt, often seen scribbling equations on napkins during hurried lunches of tea and sandwiches, pushes his team relentlessly. "We need range, accuracy, and speed," he insists, his voice echoing in the dimly lit labs where cathode ray tubes glow like ethereal eyes. The concept evolves from that Daventry test, a network of radar stations, dubbed Chain Home, stretching along Britain's eastern shores. Each station would feature massive steel towers, 300 feet tall, 4 transmitters, wooden ones for receivers beaming out pulses at 25 MHz, covering arcs up to 100 miles out to sea. Operators, trained in makeshift classrooms with chalkboard diagrams of wave propagation, learn to interpret the green spikes on their screens, a single blip for a lone scout plane, a cluster for a formation. But building this wasn't without peril. In the summer of 1936, as construction crews erect the first towers at places like Swingate near Dover, massive lattice, rising like skeletal guardians against the chalk, cliff secrecy is paramount. Workers, sworn to silence under the Official Secrets Act, labor under camouflage nets, their hammers clanging in rhythm with the crashing waves below. Watson-Watt himself tours the sites, his Austin saloon car bumping over rutted tracks, troubleshooting interference from nearby power lines or even seagulls flocking too close. One engineer, A.P. Rowe, recalls a frantic night recalibrating antennas amid a thunderstorm, lightning illuminating the towers as if the gods themselves were testing their mettle. The system demands precision. Transmitters pulse every few seconds. Receivers filter out ground clutter echoes from hills or buildings that could mask incoming threats. By 1937, the first operational stations come online, their operators mostly young RAF personnel in crisp uniforms, staring at scopes in darkened huts, plotting aircraft positions on maps with grease pencils. As the decade wanes, the urgency mounts. In Munich, Chamberlain waves his piece of paper promising peace for our time. But Watson-Watt knows better. He's seen the intelligence reports. Gring's Luftwaffe boasts over 2,000 aircraft, while the RAF scrambles to field Hurricanes and Spitfires. Chain Home becomes the equalizer. During exercises like the 1938 Biggin Hill trials, Radar-guided intercepts stunned participants' fighters vectored straight to enemy bombers, simulating raids from France. Squadron leader Douglas Bader, a legless ace with a fighter's grit, later credits these drills for honing the edge that would save Britain. Yet doubts linger. Some brass dismiss it as wizardry, unreliable in fog or rain. Watson Watt, ever the advocate, demonstrates tirelessly. His presentations filled with data, detection ranges averaging 80 miles, altitude estimates within 1,000 feet. By September 1939, as Hitler invades Poland and war erupts, 20 chain home stations stand vigilant from Ventnor on the Isle of Wight to Netherbutton in Orkney, an invisible web ready to snare the invaders. In those pre-war years, the human element shines through. Take the operators, like WAF Sergeant Joan Curran, who joins in 1939, her fingers flying over controls in stuffy bunkers lit by bare bulbs. She describes the thrill of first contact, a faint echo building on the screen. Coordinates radioed to Fighter Command at Bentley Priory, where Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowdingstone, visionary, oversees the integrated defense. Dowding, with his map tables and plotters pushing wooden blocks representing squadrons, integrates radar with observer corps reports, creating a symphony of early warning. Watson Watt's innovation isn't just tech, its lives intertwined scientists like Henry Tizard lobbying for funding, pilots like Peter Townsend testing intercepts in mock dogfights over the North Sea, engines roaring as they climb to meet phantom foes. As tensions peak, the radar net expands, with mobile units and low-level detectors filling gaps. But the true test looms. On a clear day in July 1940, as the Battle of Britain ignites, the towers hum to life, their pulses racing across the Channel. July 10, 1940, 14:17 hours. Ventnor, Chain Home Station, Isle of Wight. The sun glints off the English Channel like shattered glass as you stand in the cramped receiver hut, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the metallic temps of overheated valves. WAAF operator Helen Hogg, 19 years old, her hair pinned under a peaked cap, leans forward, eyes locked on the green cathode ray tube. A single blip stutters into existence, then another, and another, forming a ragged line moving northwest at 180 knots, bearing 168, range 85 miles. Multiple contacts, she calls, voice steady, despite the tremor in her fingers. The plot is relayed instantly via buried telephone cables to filter room at Fighter Command HQ in Bentley Priory, where plotters in navy blue uniforms slide wooden counters across a giant map table. Air Vice Marshal Keith Park, commander of 11 Group, snaps up the receiver, scramble Biggin Hill and Tangmere, Angels 1-5. Within 4 minutes, Spitfires of 74 Squadron are clawing skyward, Merlin engines snarling, pilots straining against leather harnesses as the ground falls away. These are no drills. Across the Channel, at Luftwaffe bases near Calais, Oberstleutnant Johannes Fink lifts off in his Ru-88, leading 30 bombers escorted by Bf 109s. German crews, briefed on British radio tricks, believe their altitude 15,000 feet will mask them in clutter. They are wrong. Chain Home at Dunkirk, Kent, picks them up at 112 miles, tracking as they cross the French coast. The tower's 350-foot steel lattice, humming with 200 kilowatts of pulsed power, cast an invisible net that no amount of cloud cover can pierce. By the time Fink's formation reaches Beachy Head, 12 Spitfires are already orbiting at 18,000 feet, oxygen masks fogging with every breath. Squadron leader Adolf Sailor Mallon, South African accent crackling over the RT, gives the order. Tally-ho cannons blaze. A Ru-88 spirals seaward, trailing black smoke, its crew bailing into the drink. Back at Ventnor, the operators work in shifts, 24 hours a day, fueled by tea and benzodrine. The huts are Spartan wooden benches, bakelite headphones, a single electric heater fighting the damp. Each station has 2 roles. Transmitter towers blast 20 microsecond pulses every 15 seconds. Receiver towers, offset to avoid self-interference, capture the faint echoes, sometimes weaker than a millionth of a watt. Calibration is brutal. Engineers like Edward Bowen crawl inside waveguide cavities with screwdrivers, adjusting crystals while the system is live, sparks leaping like St. Elmo's fire. False echoes plague them. Ships in the Channel, flocks of gulls. Even the metal fence around the site but experience teaches pattern recognition. A ship moves at 20 knots, a bomber at 200, a gull flaps erratically, a raid holds formation. By late July, the system is stretched thin. The Luftwaffe shifts tactics, sending low-level raids under radar coverage, Heinkel 111s, skimming waves at 50 feet, hoping to slip through. Watson Watt, now scientific advisor on telecommunications, races to Horford Ness with a mobile radar van. There, in a windswept field of marram grass, he oversees the deployment of chain-home low shorter, 200-foot wooden towers operating at 200 MHz, designed to catch intruders below 5,000 feet. The first unit goes live on August 8, just in time. That afternoon, 150 Stukas dive on convoy CW9 Peewit in the Thames estuary. CHL at Fairlight picks them at 20 miles. Hurricanes from 615 Squadron tear into the formation, scattering the dive bombers like startled starlings. One pilot, Flying Officer David Luca, later recalls the surreal sight. The radar chaps put us right on their tails, felt like cheating. The human toll mounts. On August 12th, the Luftwaffe targets the radar stations themselves. At 9:30, 15 Ru 87 Stukas, escorted by Bf-110s, streak toward Ventnor. The station's own radar detects them at 40 miles. But there's no defense, only a single Lewis gun manned by an RAF cook. Bombs whistle down. The transmitter tower crumples like tinfoil, sparks cascading into the sea. Operators evacuate through smoke-filled corridors, clutching logbooks. Yet the network endures. Adjacent stations at Pevensey and Rye overlap coverage. Within 6 hours, mobile units are en route. Watson Watt, chain-smoking in a London ops room, reroutes power through spare feeders. By nightfall, Ventnor is blind, but the chain remains unbroken. Gring, furious at the RAF's uncanny interception rate, demands answers. Intelligence officer Joseph Beppo Schmid reports. The Tommies have some form of radiolocation, possibly FIA type, but more advanced. The Germans underestimate it, assuming only a handful of stations. In reality, 30 chain home sites ring the coast, backed by 1,000 observer corps, post civilians, with binoculars and telephones, plotting visually when radar falters. The synergy is lethal. On August 15th, Adlertag the Eagle Die over 2,000 sorties are launched. Radar tracks every wave. Park and 12 groups, Trafford, the Mallory, juggle squadrons like chess pieces. Spitfires engage high, Hurricanes hit bombers low. By dusk, the Luftwaffe has lost 75 aircraft to the RAF's 34. In Berlin, pilots mutter about hexery witchcraft. As August bleeds into September, the battle intensifies. London becomes the target. The Blitz begins. Chainhome, now battle-scarred but resilient, feeds a constant stream of data. Operators develop a sixth sense, distinguishing feints from real raids, predicting altitudes from echo strength. One night, a lone Heinkel limps home. Its radio operator scribbling in his log, intercepted 80 miles out. Impossible. Watson Watts. Impossible network has become Britain's unbreakable eye. September 15, 1940, 10:45 hours. Chain home station at Poling, Sussex. The morning mist clings to the rolling downs like a shroud as you crouch in the receiver hut. The low thrum of generators vibrating through the floorboards. WAAF, Corporal Mary Bunny, Burns, her uniform sleeves rolled despite regulations, squints at the cathedral tube. The screen is a storm of green spikes, hundreds of them, stacked in waves, bearing 150,180, heading straight for London. Raid strength 200 plus, altitude 20, range 65 miles, and closing, she reports, voice cutting through the clatter of typewriters. The plot races along secure lines to Bentley Priory, where the map table erupts in a frenzy of counters. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, pipe clenched in teeth, studies the board with icy calm. Commit everything south of the Thames, he orders. Hold 12 group in reserve. Across southeast England, klaxons wail. Pilots sprint to Spitfires and Hurricanes, canopies slamming shut as Merlins roar to life. This is the day that will decide Britain's fate. In the skies, over Kent, Oberleutnant Hans Troutloft leads 26 Bf-109s from JG-54, their yellow noses glinting in the sun as they climb to 25,000 feet. Below them, 120 Dornier 17s and Heinkel 111s drone in tight Vic formations. Bombays heavy with 500-pounders aimed at London's docks. German crews are confident. They've hammered convoys, crippled radar stations, and believe the RAF is on its knees. Gring's directive is clear: annihilate fighter command in one decisive blow. But Chainholm sees them coming. From Dover to the Orkneys, 29 operational stations track every twist and turn. At Rye, a damaged tower patched with salvaged parts still pulses. At Fairlight, Chainholm low sweeps the wavetops for sneak raids. The data converges in the filter room, where WAAFs like Joan Curran, now a veteran, plotter translate blips into vectors, altitudes, and raid numbers with surgical precision. By 11:15, the first wave crosses the coast near Radar has given the RAF 20 priceless minutes. Squadron leader Peter Brose of 257 Squadron, oxygen mask dangling, leads 12 Hurricanes off from Debden. Vector 180, Angels 22, Bandits 40+, crackles the controller. Brothers pushes the throttle wide, the Hurricane's fabric wings flexing under 300 miles per hour. Below, the Thames glitters like molten silver. At 11:30, the sky explodes. Cannons chatter, tracers arc like deadly fireworks. A Dornier peels off, one engine ablaze, its crew bailing into the Kent countryside. On the ground, Observer Corps posts farmers, housewives with binoculars, phone and visual confirmations. High Givenchy is satiating bombers, turning north over Maidstone. The two systems dovetail perfectly. Back at Poling, the operators are swamped. The second wave 150 aircraft appears on scope at 12:05, overlapping the first. Mary Burns' hands fly across the gain controls, separating echoes in the clutter. New raid, bearing 160, range 70, strength 150, she calls. The hut reeks of sweat and ozone. A valve blows with a pop, but a spare is swapped in seconds. Engineers like Edward Bowen, on loan from Bordsey, stand by with toolkits, patching circuits under red emergency lights. The strain is brutal 12-hour shifts. No sleep, the constant drone of generators. One operator collapses from exhaustion, carried out on a stretcher, but the chain never falters. In the air, the battle rages for hours. Park rotates squadrons like a conductor Biggin Hill. Kenley Hornchurch, feeding fresh fighters into the maelstrom. At 13:40, a third wave of 100 bombers targets London proper. Chainholm at Dunkirk tracks them crossing the estuary at 18,000 feet. Spitfires from 11 groups, 602 Squadron, led by Flight Lieutenant Archie McKellar, climb to meet them. McKellar, a Glaswegian with a Devil May-Care grin, spots the Heinkel's first line, astern. Go 8. Spitfires dive through the escort screen. Cannons, shredding fuselages. One Heinkel explodes mid-air, debris raining over the East End. On the ground, Londoners look up from air raid shelters, awed by the dogfight silhouetting St. Paul's Dome. By 15 o'clock, the Luftwaffe is unraveling. Interceptions are relentless. Fuel-starved 109s jettison drop tanks to flee. Troutloft, nursing a damaged engine. Radio's base, heavy fighter opposition. Where do they come from? The answer is Watts network, now augmented by 50,000 Observer Corps volunteers and a web of radio direction finding stations. Every raid is met, harried, broken. At 16:30, the final stragglers limp home across the channel, leaving 56 aircraft lost against 26 RAF fighters, most pilots parachuting to safety. That night, in a smoke-filled ops room at Uxbridge Park and Dowding, review the day's plots. The map is a graveyard of red counters German losses. They threw everything at us, Park says, voice hoarse, and we were waiting. Watson Watt, summoned from Bodsey, studies the logs with quiet satisfaction. His tower-scarred patched, some still smouldering, have given Britain time, space, and lives. The Luftwaffe's invasion plan, Operation Sea Lion, teeters on the brink. Hitler, raging in the Berghof, postpones it indefinitely on September 17th. In the weeks that follow, the Blitz shifts to night bombing, but Chainholm evolves. Ground-controlled interception GCI radar, pioneered by Bowen, guides night fighters like the Beaufighter to intruders using AI airborne interception sets. The Battle of Britain is won not by numbers, but by seconds bought by radar. On September 15th alone, Chainholm's early warning turns potential catastrophe into triumph. The RAF, outnumbered 3-1 in aircraft, inflicts unsustainable losses. Gring's Eagles are grounded. As autumn rains lash the radar towers, the operators stand vigil. Mary Burns, promoted to sergeant, trains new WAAFs in the art of the blip. Watson Watt, knighted in 1942, walks the cliffs at Bodsey, watching the towers endure. His impossible network has become Britain's unbreakable spine. October 5, 1940, Bodsey Research Station, Suffolk coast. A fierce gale howls across the Orwell estuary, waves crashing against the shingle beach. 200 feet below, as you huddle in Robert Watson Watt's cluttered office, the room lit by a single desk lamp casting long shadows over stacks of yellowed telegrams and oscilloscope photographs. Watson Watt, his face gaunt from sleepless nights, pores over a fresh intelligence report smuggled from a downed Luftwaffe officer. The Freya stations detect at 100 kilometers, but the British see us at 150 even, in clouds. He leans back in his creaking chair, lighting a cigarette with trembling hands. They still don't understand. He mutters to his deputy, AP Rowe. It's not just the range, it's the system, the integration. Outside, rain lashes the remaining chain home towers, their guy wires singing in the wind like taut harpstrings. One tower at nearby Orfordness sways dangerously, but holds. The Germans are scrambling. By mid-October, Luftwaffe technicians swarm captured radar sites, desperately reverse engineering the chain home design. Major General Wolfgang Martini, head of signals intelligence, briefs Gring in a Curring Hall drawing room. The English have a giant Freya network, 30 stations, possibly more, but Freya, operating at 125 MHz, with only 70-mile range, pales in comparison. Worse, it struggles with low-altitude detection, leaving U-boats and low-flying bombers exposed. Hitler, obsessed with secrecy, forbids aggressive reconnaissance. No Mi-110s risk venturing close to probe the towers. Instead, the Luftwaffe deploys Wurzburg radar, compact mobile sets for flak control, but these are blind to anything above 15 miles. In November, as the Blitz intensifies, night raids claim 13,000 London lives, yet RAF night fighters, guided by nascent GCI stations, down 27 bombers in a single week. German crews whisper of Bristol Blighties, unseen hunters materializing from the dark. Watson Watt's team doesn't rest. In a drafty hangar at Worth Matravers, Dorset, engineers huddle around a wooden mock-up of a revolutionary device, the cavity maptotron, smuggled from Birmingham University by physicist John Randall. This fist-sized tube generates 10,000 watts at 3,000 MHz, to 100 times more power than anything before. Centimetric radar. Watson Watt breathes, eyes alight. By February 1941, the first AIMK-4 sets equip both as pilots like John Cunningham rack up kills, their scopes painting ghostly images of Heinkel 111s against the black velvet sky. Chain home low evolves into Ames Type 7, dotting the coast with 60-foot wooden towers that catch E-boats skimming at 50 feet. The network swells to 51 stations by 1942. Integrated with the Observer Corps, 1,500 posts into a seamless dowding system. Across the Atlantic, the technology leaps. In September 1940, the Tizard mission led by Henry Tizard, Watson Watt's old alley boards, a camouflaged Liberator bomber at Ferrick, Scotland, bound for Washington. In a metal casket chained to the pilot's seat, blueprints, magnetron prototypes, and Frank Whittle's jet engine designs. President Roosevelt, briefed in the Oval Office, greenlights a crash program. By 1943, American -584 Seychelles rupees sets direct descendancy, quip every Allied army. Their auto-tracking shredding V-1 buzz bombs over London at 90% efficiency. Watson Watt, promoted to wartime knighthood, tours U.S. labs, watching his impossible pulses light up screens in Pasadena and Boston. The ultimate validation comes in Normandy. June 6, 1944, as 156,000 troops stormed the beaches, 250 chain home stations reinforced upgraded track, 12,000 Luftwaffe sorties over the next months. German pilot Hans-Joachim Marseille's successors encounter the same nightmare, vectored intercepts, no escape. Post-war, captured documents revealed the toll. Radar inflicted 60% of all Luftwaffe fighter losses. General Adolf Gallen Gring's inspector admits in his memoirs, the Battle of Britain was lost before it started by our ignorance of their radio direction finding. Decades later, the towers rust on forgotten cliffs. At Bodsey, Watson Watt exiled to Canada after a messy divorce dies in obscurity in 1973, yet every modern airliner, guided by his descendants, owes him a debt. On September 15, 1940, those blips on a cathode tube didn't just save Britain. They rewrote warfare, turning the sky from a highway of death into a gauntlet of precision. The engineer from Slough had built an invisible shield and the world is still under its watch.